As I mentioned in a previous video, I am, courtesy of my local library, working my way through the 3 books in the Bone Quest for the Spark trilogy. In the previous video, I discussed what this trilogy was and why I'm reading it, and you can go visit that previous video for that information. But just to recap briefly, this is a trilogy of books, which is a sequel to the Bone comic, the epic story in the Bone comics, which is young adult books, which is not a comic. It's prose, but it's illustrated with the occasional full color picture by Jeff Smith. Example here, even though the novel is written by Tom Sniegoski. Jeff Smith is the creator of the original Bone comic, so he's not actually writing these, but he's helping with the illustrations. So with that introduction out of the way, let's get into the second book in the series, which I've just finished off this afternoon. So in this book, well, a couple things happen, and only a couple things happen, really. Again, because these books have large print and because they've got a lot of illustrations, we don't get through that much story in each book, but we get through a little bit of story. So this book is the middle book of the trilogy. The quest has already been set up, and our heroes are on their quest. They have to find the different pieces of the spark. So, yes, this is one of those fantasy stories where our heroes have to go around from place to place getting magical items. So there's a MacGuffin built into it. In this case, they have to go around from place to place getting pieces of the spark, and that's their quest. So it's a little bit like a video game. But there's also a mini quest within this quest. The airship that they are piloting runs on potatoes. It's cartoon logic, but there you go. Potatoes are the fuel for their airship. Let's see, where's a good picture? Ah, here we go. Picture of the airship. And because of events in the previous book, they are now out of potatoes. So first they have to land the airship and get some potatoes from a local market. While they are attempting to get potatoes from the local market, they are attacked by their enemies, the Inhumans and the rat creatures, and a fight/chase scene ensues. Let me see if I can find a good picture of that. Here we go. Now, in my review of book 1, I mentioned that these books were okay, but they weren't exceptional. The story was rather cliche. The prose was rather basic. But to give credit where credit is due, I think this chase/fight scene was well done. There's a few different moving parts. It's described well. There's enough stuff happening to keep you interested. Some of the characters stay and fight. Some of them run. There's different characters running in different directions. And the author keeps track of it well. And has enough different pieces moving in here to keep it from just being the bad guys attack and the good guys run. It's a rather chaotic but fun chase scene with a little bit of fighting mixed in. Let's see if we can find a picture of some of the fighting. No, that's not what I'm looking for. But yeah, the 2 rat creatures fall down and become part of the action. Oh yeah, here's part of the fighting. The Randolph, the Vinyan priest, fighting one of the Inhumans here. So that was all right. Then after they escape in their airship, sorry. I was just reminded of this, seeing the picture of, what picture did I see? Ah, yes. Seeing the picture of the plant girl here, I was just remembered that she ends up actually saving everyone by manifesting her powers to make plants grow. And it's one of those things where there's a fight chase going on for some time, and then she just comes out of nowhere to help everyone. So it's a bit like, okay, well, why didn't she just do that before? Now, to be fair, there actually is an explanation in the story why she didn't do it before, because she was distracted by these voices that she was hearing, etc. But even though that does give an explanation in the story, it does feel a little bit manufactured. A little bit too neat that she is occupied by something for just long enough to let the chase go on, and then she pulls out of it and saves everyone. They escape on their airship, which causes the Inhumans to revert to their spirit form and crash the airship. I had some questions in this section about what exactly these spirits can and can't do. I mean, why don't the spirits just attack them directly? It seems to be that the spirits can't actually attack any physical being, although they can inhabit physical beings. And it seems to be that the spirits can influence the weather, but not attack the airship directly. Okay, yep, fair enough, I guess. So the airship crashes. But luckily it crashes where they want to be anyways. They want to be able to get into the beehive, where Tom, the leader of this expedition, has had a vision that they need to get honey from the spark. Sorry, I'm flipping through to try and find the next picture to show you. As you can see here, there's actually not as many fun pictures as you might hope for from this book. But there are some. Yes, so they encounter bears, and the bears are initially hostile to them, but then the bears come over and join their team once the bears find out they're trying to infiltrate the beehive, because the bears really want to get in there and get honey. So we are... The genius of the original Bone comic was that it mixed in a lot of very fun, cartoonish humor with also a serious epic Lord of the Rings type story. And this trilogy is trying to recapture that tone somewhat. So we do have this big epic battle between good and evil going on here. But now we also have a fun cartoon story about bears trying to sneak into the beehive and steal some honey. And it does get pretty silly. They find bee suits. Let me see if I can find a picture of that. They get these bee suits that they put on, which, obviously are not going to fool anyone, although the bears are convinced that these bee suits make them look exactly like bees. They're also using some smoke to try and smoke out the bees. The giant bees, of course, if you read the original Bone comic, they made a cameo appearance at the early stages of the original Bone epic. It was kind of just a one-note gag about how big the bees were in the valley. And now we're exploring that a little bit more. So the giant bees and the honey they're going to steal. So the general setup is whimsical, and in so much as you give credit for the general setup or the general framework of the story creating a whimsical feeling, we can give that some credit. In execution, it is again rather bland. So there is attempt at humor here, but it's just not very good. I hate to say this, but Tom Sniegoski, the author here, does not have the charm of the original that Jeff Smith did. The bears have some quirks, but the humor comes off a little bit flat on the page, and a lot of these jokes a lot of the attempts of humor just don't really land. For example, one of the bears is always falling asleep because his hibernation schedule is off. But yeah, it's the humor itself is very flat. So not near the charm of the original Bone comics, but okay. There are also some character moments which don't work. So while they are planning the bee disguises, Abby Bone gets upset because it was her idea, but the others aren't giving her credit. So she goes and pouts for a while, and Tom comes over to tell her how wonderful she is. And then some of the other characters tell her, yes, you're wonderful, you're very smart, and she gets her confidence back. Yeah. There's a couple problems with this. One is the whole thing is a bit cliched. Two is the prose, again, is a bit plotting, as if we're having this character moment because the author knows we've got to have a few character moments in a YA story like this, so he just shoehorns it in. Kind of comes out of nowhere. The prose isn't great. The whole thing is a bit plotting. But the other thing is Abby Bone, certainly as she was portrayed in the first book, this comes a little bit less strongly in the second book, but she was more the dominant one in the first book, who was constantly pushing herself to the front, who was constantly punching her brother, and constantly asserting that she was the oldest and so she was the leader. So to have her character arc where she feels unappreciated and then needs to get her confidence back feels a little bit strange here. Now, granted, they do tone this down in the second book, but these books are really small and they take place over the time span of like a couple days. So that doesn't really mean anything in my book. I wonder if, I don't know. I wonder if the author was trying to reverse the character dynamics he set up in the first book, saying, okay, forget in the first book how she was the bully. Now in this book she's going to be the victim, and just counting on his audience not remembering it from the first book. I don't know. I don't know. Either that or the whole character arc is clumsily done. But we have this little moment. And then they sneak into the beehive and have adventures stealing honey from the bees before they are caught and have to communicate. There's a couple continuity nitpicks I'm going to nitpick, and I know this is a little bit pedantic, but sometimes I can be that guy. Let me find a good picture here. Here we go. So, when the giant bees made a short cameo in the original Bone comic, it was established that they spoke English, or at least they spoke the common language that all the other characters were speaking. Here, the bees communicate in a hum and clicking of their mandibles, which Tom is only able to understand because the power of the spark, which he is wearing around his neck, translates everything for him and makes his language accessible to the bees. I suppose you could wave that away by saying maybe these are different bees than the bees that were in the Bone comic. Well, I'm nitpicking here. Another inconsistency that I think I found was that they use coins in this book. It was mentioned briefly in the first book, but it comes up even more strongly in the second book because they're in the market now and having to buy things with coins. Now, of course, everyone who's read the Bone comic knows that a major part of the story arc in the early part of the Bone comic is Smiley Bone and Phony Bone get themselves in trouble because they don't realize it's a barter economy in the valley. Although, again, maybe you could explain that part away again by positing that there are different parts of the valley with different monetary systems. As I said in a previous video anyways, I always thought that the bit about the valley being on a barter economy didn't really make sense anyways for that level of civilization that they had. But I realize it was just a gag for the sake of setting up that funny plot line. So I guess I'm not overly disturbed that they dropped that part of it. But anyways. And then they get their part of the spark from their bees. They escape from their enemies one more time. And that's pretty much the end of the second book. Like I said, there are a few unearned and forced character moments in here, but it's mostly quite readable. Tom the boy has been chosen by the Dreaming, which is a kind of a spirit, to be the leader of this expedition, in spite of the fact that Randolph, the seasoned warrior, would probably be the much better leader. Throughout the second book, both Randall and Tom are wondering why Tom has been chosen as the leader. So I guess to give credit, the book is not avoiding the issue, but the more the book focuses on the issue, the more the reader, or at least me, is thinking to themselves, yeah, why is Tom the leader? It doesn't seem to make any sense. Tom seems to have an intuition. Odd ideas will just come to him at times, which I guess it advanced the plot and help the group, and I guess justify him as being the leader. But it's often not clear where Tom is getting these ideas, other than they're just coming to him as visions in the Dreaming. So I guess this is true of a lot of YA books, isn't it? Maybe it's silly to start complaining about this now, but it's unearned. Tom doesn't really gain abilities through study or hard work or anything like that. Tom just all of a sudden discovers that he is this incredibly gifted boy who is chosen by the universe to be this leader. Okay, maybe that is just a lot of YA. This is a book, or this is a series, like I said before, that is really trafficking in lazy cliches. So maybe we can let that part go. In spite of all my complaining, this is a story that was pretty fun to read. I say pretty because the prose is a little bit plodding. So it's not prose that grips you. It's prose that occasionally I had to kind of remind myself to concentrate during some of the more boring parts where your brain just switches off because the prose is just going through the motions. But there are other parts before, like I said, the big fight chase scene at the first half that do work much better. And the general tone of the book is appealing. Again, the combination of these whimsical, cartoonish type setting, the bears stealing the honey from the bees, with the larger conflict of good and evil. It was done much better in the original Bone comic, but it's still appealing as a general premise here. And I think I'm going to wrap this review up here. So next I'm on to book 3, which I've already got out of the library. So with any luck, I should finish this off in a couple days. These books tend to be short reads. and then I'll come back with my review of this one next.